Imagine being a 12-year-old boy living in a tiny village in Bulgaria during the year 1550. The morning fog clings tightly to the valley like a veil as you assist your father with the sheep. The soft jingling of the bells hanging around their necks creates a familiar melody that has been the backdrop of your whole life. Your mother is busy preparing breakfast. Warm bread and fresh goat's milk that tastes like comfort, like safety, like everything you have ever known. Suddenly, you hear it, the pounding sound of hooves striking the cobblestones. Your father's face pales as white as parchment, and your mother drops the clay dish she was holding. It shatters on the floor, as if your world is breaking apart, because everyone in the village understands what those hoofbeats mean. The Sultan's tax collectors have arrived. You watch carefully from behind a wooden cart as the Ottoman officers dismount. Their silk robes remain immaculate despite the long trip. They carry scrolls and lists, their eyes cold and calculating, like traders sizing up livestock. One of them points directly at you. Your mother falls to her knees, pleading in a language they refuse to acknowledge. Your father stays silent, aware that any opposition would bring death upon the whole family. You are torn away with promises that you are to serve the Sultan, that greatness awaits you, that this is a high honor. Yet as the cart moves further and further from everything you have ever loved, all you can hear are your mother's sobs slowly disappearing into the distance. Far beyond your sight, she would never appear again. This marked the start of your new existence as a palace boy, a goom, within the mightiest empire on earth. The terrors lurking beyond the palace gates would make you yearn for the simple moments spent watching sheep graze in the mist-covered hills of your homeland. Now, as you delve into these overlooked tales of endurance and hardship, if you appreciate uncovering the hidden facets of history, consider pressing the like button and subscribing for similar content. Also, please share in the comments where you are tuning in from. It amazes me that we can uncover these ancient narratives together from diverse regions of the world, united across both time and space by our mutual fascination with the past. The journey to Istanbul introduced you to the cold cruelty that would come to define your existence. Alongside dozens of boys your age, you were forced to march for weeks over harsh landscapes, receiving barely enough food and sleeping outdoors, or in makeshift shelters that offered scant protection against the weather. Those too frail, those who could not keep pace, those who fell ill or lost all hope, were abandoned to perish. Even before arriving at the capital, you grasped your first harsh truth about life in the Ottoman palace. Weakness meant death. Only those who were strongest, most shrewd, or most adaptable had any chance to endure the ordeals ahead. The boy walking beside you, perhaps 14 years old, was taken from a Greek fishing village. His name was Nick, though he whispered to you that soon that name would become forbidden. He attempted to flee on the third night of the march, but the guards caught him before he reached even a mile. They dragged him back to the camp and punished him brutally in front of all the other boys as a warning. His screams echoed across the fields, and you shut your eyes tightly, trying to block out the noise. Yet you could not escape the lesson. Fleeing was hopeless, and fighting back was pointless. By the time you arrived at the outskirts of Istanbul, you had learned to move like a shadow, speak only when addressed, and vanish from sight when the guard's attention turned dangerous. You had witnessed boys vanish in the darkness, some who attempted to escape, and others who simply could not bear another day. The gaps left by those missing served as constant reminders of your own fragile existence. The first glimpse of Istanbul's skyline should have been awe-inspiring. The minarets piercing the sky, the huge dome of Hagia Sophia, the vast palace complex that would soon trap you. Instead, you only felt a deep, hollow fear weighing heavy in your stomach like a stone. This magnificent city was the embodiment of all you had lost and all you now dreaded becoming. Upon arrival in Istanbul, the first ordeal awaited you: the selection. Ottoman officials separated the remaining boys into groups according to their assumed potential. The procedure was humiliating and meticulous. They inspected your teeth as if you were livestock, tested your reflexes, and made you endure harsh examinations designed to determine your fate. Recite the little you knew about letters and numbers as they measured your height, examined your skin for imperfections, and assessed your facial features with the clinical precision of art critics. The most stunning and intelligent were destined for the palace school, the Enderun, while others would join the Janissaries, the elite military force. However, for those chosen to serve the palace, a different kind of trial lay ahead. One that would challenge not only your physical limits, but also your soul's resilience. You were among the lucky few selected for the Enderun school, located within the walls of Topkapi Palace. The officials who made this decision observed your clear complexion, bright eyes, and evident intelligence, and they smiled. At that time, you did not realize that their smiles were not kind, but rather those of hunters who had found especially promising prey. The Enderun School has been described as the world's first formal education system for the gifted. Although this description is technically true, it conceals the darker truth of what education meant for displaced boys like you. Indeed, you would learn languages such as Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. You would study mathematics, astronomy, literature, and law. You would also be trained in music, calligraphy, and various crafts. Yet this education came with a price far beyond academic challenges. The palace complex, which became your entire world, was a labyrinth of marble halls, lavish rooms, and secret passages. The passages were filled with lurking danger at every turn. You were housed in dormitories within the vast palace complex, separated from the outside world by numerous layers of walls, guards, and strict protocols that made any attempt to escape not only difficult, but utterly unimaginable. The dormitory where you would sleep stretched out before you like a cold marble tomb, lined with narrow beds draped in silk that felt more like chains tightening around your skin. On your very first night in the dormitory, you lay awake, listening to the sounds that would soon become the soundtrack of your captivity. The soft sobs of homesick boys muffling their tears with their pillows, whispered conversations in languages you could not understand, and the quiet footsteps of older students and supervisors patrolling the halls after lights had been extinguished. You clutched tightly to the small wooden cross your mother had pressed into your hand as you were taken away. But by morning, even that fragile last link to your past life was found and confiscated. A new name was given to you, Mesmet, and you were ordered to forget your Christian roots entirely. Conversion to the empire's official religion was not a choice. It was fundamental to your transformation from a captured child into an Ottoman servant. The ceremony was performed with elaborate ceremony, as though you had eagerly chosen this destiny yourself. Yet you and everyone else knew there had been no choice involved. You repeated the phrases they instructed you to say, but deep inside, you clung to the memories of your mother's lullabies and your father's voice. Stories reveal that the most dangerous part of your education was the deliberate destruction of your personal will and your rebuilding as a tool for imperial control and pleasure. The palace functioned through a complex social order, where moving up depended not only on academic success, but also on how well you could satisfy those above you. Pleasing others came in many forms that no child should ever be forced to experience. Your initial introduction to the palace's hidden rules came from Amit, an older student entrenched in the system for 3 years. One evening, he approached you in the dormitory, his voice mixing menace and promise. "You are new," he said, sitting on the edge of your bed without asking. "You don't understand how things operate here yet, but I can shield you, guide you, help you gain favor. The teachers trust me, and they follow my advice about the younger boys." His hand settled on your shoulder, and you froze. At 12 years old, you had never been touched by a stranger, but something about his approach sent a chill through you. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a whisper, and stated that you would need to express your thanks. He implied there were certain ways boys like you could repay older students for their protection, ways kept secret between them. You confronted an impossible dilemma, one faced by countless boys before you. Refuse his demand and face harsh punishment, exclusion, and dashed hopes for progression, or accept and relinquish the last fragments of your autonomy. Childhood innocence was shattered by a system that treated your body as a commodity to be exchanged for favor and protection. There was no right option, only the instinct to survive. The palace's sexual environment was intricate and predatory, following rules passed down through many generations of exploitation. Eunuchs, who had been castrated as children and often carried their own emotional wounds, held significant influence and used it to take advantage of the steady flow of newcomers. They knew the system inside out because they had been victims themselves, but instead of shielding beginners, many became its most zealous enforcers. Older students preyed upon the younger ones, continuing cycles of abuse that had lasted for generations. It was a perverted type of initiation where the newcomers earned their rank in the social order by victimizing those even lower than themselves. Palace officials exploited their authority to freely access the most attractive boys, fully aware that these victims had nowhere to turn and nobody to ask for justice. What made this arrangement especially cruel was how deeply it was embedded into the official power structure. Sexual relationships were openly accepted, not secret scandals. They were part of the social fabric, intertwined so closely with daily life that they appeared both normal and unavoidable. Boys who attracted the attention of influential patrons could experience rapid advancement in their careers, easier studies, and more comfortable lives. On the other hand, those who rejected such advances often faced hardships and setbacks, making participation in this oppressive system almost impossible to avoid. Those who displeased their superiors often found themselves assigned to lowly duties, subjected to stricter punishments, or simply vanished from palace life completely. The psychological toll on boys like you was immense and deliberately inflicted. Severed from your family, stripped of your true identity, and thrust into an environment where your body was treated as mere property, you developed what today might be described as complex trauma reactions. Some boys became shrewd and cunning, using their sexuality as a means to gain favor and survive, while others retreated inward, becoming empty shells, barely going through the motions as their inner spirit withered away. You observed both these changes happening to boys around you. Dmitri, who had been taken from the same area as you, learned to smile and charm the older students and teachers. Within half a year, he boasted new clothes, better food, and even a private tutor for his language lessons. Yet his eyes lost their spark, and he stopped talking about home or family. When new boys arrived, he regarded them with the same cold, calculating stare that officials had once aimed at him. Stefanos, a Greek boy and son of a fisherman, chose a different path. He rejected all advances, endured punishments and beatings, and slowly faded into a ghost-like presence. He carried out his responsibilities mechanically, studied well enough but without passion, and seemed to disappear more and more with each passing day. One morning, Nick's bed was found empty, and from that day forward, no one ever spoke his name again. He tried to navigate a middle ground by accepting some advances in order to survive while preserving a part of himself that remained intact. Yet the palace's very structure made finding such a compromise impossible. Each new day came with fresh trials and decisions forced upon him, choices between losing his dignity or facing total destruction, new methods through which the system attempted to reshape him in its own likeness. European visitors who traveled to the Ottoman court occasionally caught glimpses of this secret world, although their records were often colored by their own cultural prejudices and limited insight. A Venetian ambassador in the 16th century remarked on the officials' strong preference for their young male attendants, describing scenes that deeply disturbed him. He recounted witnessing boys as young as 10 or 11, adorned in silk and precious stones, serving older men with a level of intimacy indicating relationships much more complex than proper master-servant interactions. Then a French diplomat from the 17th century gave a more candid account of what he observed during a royal gathering, noting how the young pages moved through the corridors like exquisite birds confined in cages, their gazes lowered, bodies decorated to be seen. He could not help but observe the possessiveness with which some officials treated these children and the flicker of fear in the boys' eyes when their superiors drew near. The harsh physical conditions of life inside the palace only made matters worse. Psychological mistreatment was employed in methods aimed at dismantling your resistance and fostering dependence. You resided in crowded dormitories offering little privacy, where every second was monitored and regulated. You were roused before daybreak for prayers and compelled to memorize them. Meals provided were sufficient but not plentiful, served at exact times, and you followed a strict routine that left no opportunity for contemplation or defiance. Punishments occurred frequently and were inventively designed to degrade and crush morale. Boys who disobeyed rules, spoke their native tongues, practiced old customs, or failed to show enough enthusiasm for their new existence faced beatings, public shaming, or confinement in tiny rooms barely large enough to lie down. You observed a boy named Milos, who had been discovered praying according to his previous faith. He was forced to stand unclothed in the courtyard all day, while other students were encouraged to ridicule him. The message was unmistakable. Your former identity was not merely banned, it was a source of disgrace. The internal economy of the palace made your circumstances even more complex and introduced extra layers of exploitation. You could earn limited privileges by demonstrating good conduct, excelling academically, or gaining favor with your superiors in various ways. These privileges, such as better food, improved clothing, more comfortable sleeping spaces, and access to books or musical instruments, became highly valuable within your confined reality. The system established a tangled network of obligations and allegiances made resistance nearly unthinkable, and collaboration appear as the sole means to endure. You learned to maneuver through this environment with the shrewdness of someone far beyond your years. You realized that assisting older students with their lessons could secure you protection against their advances. Demonstrating exceptional skill in certain subjects attracted the attention of teachers who might defend you from the worst mistreatment. Perfect compliance and visible eagerness toward your new existence could earn small liberties that felt immense within your restricted world. Some boys tried to escape, but the palace's position on a peninsula surrounded by water rendered this nearly impossible. Those captured suffered harsh consequences that were intentionally publicized to discourage others. You witnessed a boy who attempted to flee by swimming across the Golden Horn return barely alive. The brutal beating he endured before all the other students left him permanently wounded. He became a living warning to the rest of you, broken and almost non-functional, embodying the fate of those who chose defiance instead of submission. The rare few boys who succeeded in fleeing confronted an even greater hurdle. Having spent so long in the palace and with their original identities erased completely, reintegrating into their past lives It was impossible for their families not to recognize them. Their communities might reject them as traitors or converts, and they had few abilities that could help them survive outside the palace system. Most who fled were captured again within days. Yet even those who stayed free often felt lost in a world that no longer seemed to have a place for them. As you grew within the system, navigating survival through a mix of intelligence, adaptability, and carefully measured compliance, you confronted new trials and a deeper corruption of your spirit. The most accomplished students could eventually be appointed to prominent government roles, but this achievement came at the expense of upholding the very system that had harmed them. You gradually understood with growing dread that your instructors and supervisors, the men who shaped and scarred you, had once been boys like yourself, taken from their homes and transformed into instruments of imperial control. This awareness forced a dreadful decision upon you. You could reject the system and probably be destroyed by it, or you could fully embrace it and become one of its enforcers, responsible for selecting the next group of boys, breaking them down and remaking them, preserving the palace's order of power. and exploitation. Many boys chose the latter path, finding it easier to become predators rather than remain prey indefinitely. Ultimately, the ceremony called Chikma represented the conclusion of your palace education and the beginning of your new role. After enduring years of systematic mistreatment disguised as education, you stepped into adulthood fluent in several languages, adept in administration and diplomacy, and educated in various arts and sciences. Yet, you also emerged as someone whose spirit had been deeply damaged, whose grasp of power was permanently linked to exploitation, and whose ability to form normal human connections had suffered in ways that might never fully recover. For many who completed this journey, the change simply meant shifting from one form of exploitation to a different one. Those assigned to administrative roles found themselves in an environment where sexual favors and political gain remained closely connected. The lessons about power, submission, and survival learned within the palace walls continued to influence their adult existence. Individuals placed in military positions carried psychological wounds from their palace experiences, often becoming either ruthless agents of imperial authority or broken individuals seeking purpose in lives founded on abuse. The attitude of the Ottoman elite towards these practices was intricate and intentionally devised to sustain the system while denying its darkest realities. Although official rules forbade many abusive actions, palace authorities often ignored behaviors that benefited their interests. The system succeeded in producing competent administrators and loyal servants, which was its main goal, despite the significant human toll. The system was regarded as irrelevant to its success, and any criticism was brushed aside as a lack of understanding of the empire's intricate methods of education and progression. Writers from the Ottoman era occasionally recognized the darker sides of the system while still defending its overall merit. A historian from the 16th century stated, "It is true that the palace school requires significant sacrifices from its students, and that not all who enroll come out unchanged, yet from this forge of discipline and knowledge emerge the empire's finest servants, men whose loyalty has been proven and whose skills have been sharpened to excellence." This narrative of transformation and self-improvement concealed the true experience of boys like you. Your trials involved systematic sexual abuse, your discipline meant the erasure of your original identity, followed by the creation of a new self intended to serve imperial goals. Your education came at the expense of your childhood innocence and your ability to form normal human bonds. What makes the Ottoman palace system particularly unsettling is the way it intertwined genuine educational benefits with systematic abuse, making it hard to distinguish the advantages from the suffering. Boys did gain an education that was remarkably advanced for the era. They learned to read and write in languages that unlocked opportunities across the known world and studied sciences and mathematics that were the cutting edge you obtained from. Your mistakes included skills in negotiation, governance, and military tactics that would benefit you throughout your entire life. However, this education could not be separated from exploitation and mistreatment. The very instructors who enriched your intellect also harmed your body. The same establishment that offered opportunities simultaneously destroyed your innocence. The institution that guaranteed progress also made certain that success was always stained by the means used to reach it. This system further exposes the complicated connection between authority, sexuality, and violence in pre-modern societies. The Ottomans were not alone in exploiting youth. Comparable practices appeared in different forms across ancient and medieval civilizations. Yet, the Ottoman institution stood out due to its vast scope, organization, and integration within the imperial framework. It was not some secret wrongdoing, but a public establishment praised for its efficiency and protected by those who benefited from it. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the palace system started to deteriorate as advances in warfare lessened the significance of the janissary units, and new administrative methods reduced dependence on palace-trained officials. European influence and evolving societal views also played a role in the gradual alteration of the system. However, These developments came too late for the thousands of boys who passed through palace doors at its peak. Their narratives of struggle and transformation remain a powerful testament. Lost childhood, shattered innocence, and broken spirits in service of imperial authority illustrate one of history's most thorough instances of systemic child abuse. The boys who endured this harsh reality had to learn how to survive in a realm where their attractiveness was both a benefit and a burden, where their intellect was appreciated but their humanity disregarded. To progress, they were forced to relinquish fragments of their souls, never to regain them. Some ascended to influential roles such as viziers, generals, and governors, shaping the empire's future, yet they bore the invisible wounds of their time in the palace. Many continued harmful patterns they had experienced, while others vanished into obscurity with their sufferings left undocumented and their fates unknown. The palace walls that once echoed with the steps of these young boys remain standing today, repurposed as a museum where visitors admire the stunning architecture and artistic riches of the Ottoman court. Tourists are captivated by the exquisite rooms where the empire's elite received education, yet they notice only the outward beauty. The marble hallways conceal their darkest stories, and the chambers where learning and exploitation coexisted remain silent about the tremendous cost paid by countless generations of boys in exchange for imperial prestige. Although guided tours recount the history of the palace, they rarely reveal the profound human toll beneath the surface. The school's educational innovations and its part in preparing skilled administrators are often highlighted. Its role in the empire's achievements is frequently praised. However, the systematic mistreatment that was essential to how it operated goes unmentioned. The boys who chose death rather than comply with its harsh expectations, or the men who left its grounds forever altered by their experiences within those walls, are rarely discussed. As I conclude this story, imagining your experience as one among countless others, I am reminded that these narratives of pain and endurance are not just historical anecdotes. They represent real people, children forcibly separated from their families, stripped of their true identities, and forced to exist in a world that valued their bodies and minds, while disregarding their humanity as unimportant to the empire's grand plans. You, the boy I have pictured standing in those marble corridors with fear gripping your heart and silence on your lips, symbolize thousands of actual children whose names remain unknown, whose personal stories were never recorded, and whose suffering was ignored by the very system that shaped and maintained it. Your spirit and the spirits of all boys like you still wander those palace halls, reminding us that beneath the grandeur of every empire lies a base constructed on human agony, and that the cost of power often falls on those who have no say in the matter. The terror was not only in the cruelty itself, but also in how methodically it was inflicted, how fully it became accepted as normal, and how deeply it was ingrained in daily life. Overlooked by history, you and boys like you lived and passed away within a system that regarded you as mere beautiful objects to be shaped and exploited. Your experiences deserve recognition not as rare historical details, but as powerful examples of human endurance against systematic cruelty. The morning air that once witnessed your anxious steps has long since disappeared, yet your story continues to resonate through time, urging us to acknowledge your pain and remember the heavy toll of the empire's so-called golden era. By recalling your narrative, we pay tribute not only to your personal hardship, but also to the suffering of every child trapped in the mechanisms of authority throughout the ages, used and discarded by regimes that prioritize domination above kindness and empire over innocence.